Welcome to this deep dive. We are going to be taking a deep dive into the world of John Locke. You've asked to understand more about this philosophical giant.
He is a giant.
Yeah, so we're thrilled to kind of take you on this journey with us. We'll be drawing from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on Locke.
It's a really good one.
Oh, good. Okay, good. And trust me, it is jam-packed with insights. So buckle up as we explore Locke's pretty incredible life, his groundbreaking ideas on human understanding, the power of language, and the foundations of government as he saw them.
Well, I think what's so fascinating about Locke is that his life was just as vibrant as his ideas. Imagine 17th century England, a nation grappling with political and religious upheaval, kind of witnessing the birth pangs of modern science. It was just a time of intense intellectual ferment, and Locke was right at the heart of it.
It sounds like the perfect setting for philosophical revolution. Tell me more about Locke's life. What kind of experiences shaped his thinking?
Yeah, well, you have to understand that England in the 1600s was a society in transition. The power of the monarchy was being challenged, traditional religious views were clashing with new ideas, and the scientific revolution was turning old assumptions upside down. I mean, this was the world Locke was born into.
It's amazing to think that someone who grew up in such a tumultuous time would go on to lay the groundwork for modern democracy and individual rights. It makes you wonder if the chaos around him fueled his desire for a more rational and just society.
I think that's a great point, yeah.
Yeah.
It's impossible to separate Locke's ideas from the historical context in which they emerged. His life experiences undoubtedly shaped his philosophical outlook.
Okay, so walk me through some of those life experiences. Where did it all begin for Locke?
Well, so Locke was educated at Westminster School and then at Christ Church, Oxford. Now, Oxford at that time was steeped in traditional Aristotelian philosophy, which emphasized logic, deduction, and the idea of innate ideas.
Innate ideas. So the belief that we're born with certain knowledge already imprinted in our minds. That's a far cry from the blank slate concept that Locke is famous for.
Exactly. But you have to remember, this was also a time when the new science was emerging, challenging traditional ways of thinking. Think Galileo, Kepler, and figures like John Wilkins, who was leading a group at Oxford that would later become the Royal Society. This group emphasized observation, experimentation, and the idea that knowledge comes from experience.
So Locke was exposed to both the old and the new, the traditional and the revolutionary. I can see how that tension might have sparked some brilliant ideas.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just an abstract tension. Locke was deeply embedded in this intellectual shift. He befriended Robert Boyle, the father of chemistry, and even had a close friendship with Isaac Newton, the man who revolutionized our understanding of gravity. These weren't just casual acquaintances. They were intellectual collaborators who deeply influenced Locke's thinking.
Wow, imagine being a fly on the wall during those conversations. It's like the 17th century version of a scientific dream team. But hold on, didn't Locke also have a medical background?
He did, and this is where things get even more interesting. He became the personal physician to Lord Ashley, a prominent political figure. And in 1668, Locke actually performed a groundbreaking surgery on Ashley, a procedure so well documented that it actually advanced medical practice.
Seriously?
Yeah. He consulted doctors across England and emphasized cleanliness practices that were revolutionary for the time.
That's incredible. So not only was he rubbing shoulders with scientific giants, but he was also pushing the boundaries of medicine. It sounds like he had a knack for challenging the status quo.
Absolutely. And to top it off, the surgery saved Ashley's life.
Of course it did.
Ashley would later become the Earl of Shaftesbury and a major political figure. It's fascinating to think how this medical intervention might have had ripple effects on English history.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time. But how did Locke go from being a doctor and a friend of scientists to becoming one of the most influential philosophers of all time?
Well, there's a great anecdote about this. So Locke was at a gathering with friends discussing the principles of morality in religion.
Pretty heavy stuff.
Right. And they found themselves getting stuck hitting these roadblocks in their reasoning. And Locke then suggested that before tackling such complex questions, they needed to first understand the human mind and its capabilities. He wanted to know, how do we learn? What can we truly know?
So before diving into the deep end of morality and religion, he wanted to figure out how our minds even work. That's such a Locke move, getting to the root of things, questioning the very foundation of knowledge itself.
Exactly. And this, he tells us, was the spark that led him to write his masterpiece, an essay concerning human understanding.
An essay concerning human understanding, a title that doesn't exactly scream beach read. What was Locke trying to achieve in this work?
Well, in a nutshell, Locke sets out to determine the limits of human understanding. He asks, what can we truly know and how do we come to know it? And in answering these questions, he challenges the traditional view inherited from philosophers like Plato and Descartes that we are born with innate ideas.
So instead of coming pre-programmed with knowledge, Locke is saying that our minds are like blank slates at birth, that we learn through experience.
Precisely. He uses the term tabula rasa, Latin for blank slate, to describe the mind at birth. He argues that all our knowledge arises from two sources: sensation, which is our perception of the physical world through our senses, and reflection, which is our internal process of thinking about our own ideas and experiences.
Okay, so let me see if I'm getting this. Instead of being born with, say, the concept of justice already implanted in our minds, we develop our understanding of justice through our interactions with the world and our reflections on those experiences.
Exactly. And this emphasis on experience as the foundation of knowledge is called empiricism, and it's a cornerstone of modern science.
It's fascinating how Locke's ideas about the mind connect to the rise of modern science. It's like he was anticipating this shift towards observation and experimentation as the primary means of acquiring knowledge.
Absolutely. Locke's empiricism challenged the authority of tradition and dogma. He believed that knowledge wasn't something handed down from on high, but something we actively construct through our engagement with the world. And this had huge implications, not just for science, but for politics, religion, and education as well.
Okay, I'm starting to see how radical Locke's ideas really were. But before we get to those other areas, I'm curious about one more thing. Didn't Locke also have some pretty interesting views on language?
He did, and his ideas that language are closely tied to his theory of knowledge. He believed that language is an essential tool for understanding and classifying the world around us. Remember those blank slates? Well, Locke argued that words act as labels for the ideas we form through experience. They allow us to group similar things together and make sense of the vast diversity of existence.
So the word table isn't just a random sound. It represents our general concept of a table, which we've formed through encountering various tables in our lives.
Exactly. It's the concept, the category that the word signifies. This ability to categorize and classify is what allows us to organize knowledge.
So for Locke, language isn't just about communication, it's a tool for thinking, for making sense of the world.
That's a great way to put it. And this leads us to one of Locke's most important distinctions: the difference between what he called nominal essences and real essences.
Nominal essences and real essences. I have a feeling this is where things get a little more philosophical.
Perhaps. But don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. Think about it this way. The nominal essence of something is our human-made concept of it, based on the observable qualities we associate with it. So our nominal essence of a table might include features like flat surface, four legs, and used for eating.
Okay, I'm following so far. But what about the real essence?
The real essence, for Locke, is the underlying structure or constitution of the thing itself, whatever that may be. It's the thing as it exists independently of our perception and our concept.
So the real essence of a table might involve its molecular structure, the way its atoms are arranged, which is something we can't directly observe with our senses.
Exactly. And here's the key point. Locke argued that we can never fully grasp the real essence of things. Our knowledge is always limited to the nominal essences we construct through experience and language.
So even something as seemingly simple as a table has hidden depths that we can never fully comprehend.
That's the idea. And this distinction between nominal and real essences has huge implications for how we understand the nature of knowledge and reality. It suggests that our knowledge is always partial, always constructed, always shaped by our limited perspective.
Wow, that's a pretty humbling thought. It makes you realize that even the most everyday objects hold mysteries we may never fully unravel. But I can see how this focus on the limits of human understanding might have led Locke to question other sources of authority, like the government or the church.
You're absolutely right. Locke's skepticism about our ability to grasp the real essence of things extended to his views on politics and religion as well. He believed that, just as we should be wary of claims to absolute knowledge about the natural world, we should be equally skeptical of claims to absolute power in the realms of government and religion.
So from the limits of human understanding to the foundations of political and religious freedom, it sounds like we're about to enter some pretty exciting territory.
We are, but that's a conversation for our next deep dive.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of John Locke. Last time we left off with Locke's groundbreaking ideas about knowledge and language. He argued that our minds are blank slates at birth, that we learn through experience, and that language is a powerful tool for for organizing our understanding of the world.
Right. And as you kind of hinted at the end of our last conversation, these ideas about knowledge and language have really profound implications for Locke's political philosophy.
Yeah, that's what I'm really eager to explore. I mean, how does a theory of the mind lead to a theory of government? It seems like a pretty big leap.
It might seem that way at first, but the connection becomes clear when you consider Locke's concept of natural rights.
Natural rights. That's a phrase we hear a lot these days. But what did it actually mean to Locke?
Well, for Locke, natural rights are those rights that individuals possess independently of any government or social contract. They are inherent to our nature as human beings, kind of endowed by our creator, if you will.
So these rights aren't granted by a king or a parliament. They exist prior to any political system.
Precisely. And for Locke, the most fundamental natural rights are the rights to life, liberty, and property. Notice that he places property right up there with life and liberty. This is crucial to his thinking.
Property is interesting. Why was it so central to Locke's concept of natural rights?
Well, you have to remember that Locke was writing in the 17th century, a time when the traditional view of property was really being challenged. The old feudal system, where land ownership was tied to social hierarchy and inherited privilege, was kind of giving way to a more dynamic and market-driven economy.
So Locke's emphasis on property rights reflects this changing economic landscape.
Exactly. He saw private property as essential for individual freedom and economic prosperity. He argued that when individuals are free to own and control their own property, they're more likely to be productive, innovative, and independent.
But hold on, how do you justify private property in the first place? I mean, if we're all born with equal rights, wouldn't everything belong to everyone?
That's where Locke's theory of labor comes in. He argues that when we mix our labor with something from the common store of nature, we make it our own. We transform it, add value to it, and thereby acquire a right to it.
So if I cultivate a piece of land, plant crops, and build a house on it, it becomes my property because I've invested my labor in it.
Exactly. Locke's labor theory of property provided a justification for private ownership that was rooted in individual effort and initiative, rather than inherited status or arbitrary decrees from those in power.
That's a pretty radical idea for its time. But how does all this connect to the need for government? If we're all born with these natural rights, why not just live in a state of nature, free from any external authority?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of Locke's social contract theory. To understand this, we need to delve into Locke's concept of the state of nature.
Okay, the state of nature. This is where Locke asks us to imagine a world without government, right? Sort of like a philosophical thought experiment.
Exactly. It's not about a specific historical period, but rather a hypothetical scenario that allows us to examine the fundamental principles of human social and political life.
So in this state of nature, there are no laws, no police, no courts. It's just individuals interacting with each other, guided by their own reason and conscience.
Precisely. And for Locke, this state of nature is not necessarily a chaotic or brutal war of all against all, like Thomas Hobbes famously described it. Locke believed that individuals in the state of nature are governed by natural law.
Natural law, what's that?
Natural law, for Locke, is the idea that there are universal moral principles, accessible through reason, that govern human conduct even in the absence of formal laws or a government to enforce them.
So even without a written legal code, there are still certain things that are right and wrong just by virtue of our nature as rational beings.
Exactly. Locke believed that natural law dictates that we have a duty to preserve ourselves and others, and that we should not harm others in their life, liberty, or possessions.
So it's not a free-for-all where anything goes. There are still moral constraints on our behavior, even in the absence of a formal legal system. But then why leave the state of nature at all? If natural law is sufficient to guide our actions, why bother with government?
Well, because as Locke recognized, the state of nature has some serious drawbacks.
Like what?
Well, the biggest problem is that in the state of nature, there's no impartial judge to resolve disputes or to enforce the laws of nature. Everyone is their own judge, jury, and executioner, which can lead to bias, conflict, and injustice.
So even though we all have these natural rights in the state of nature, they're not very secure. There's no guarantee that others will respect them.
That's the key insight. Natural rights are great in theory, but without a system to protect them, they're vulnerable to violation. And that's where the social contract comes in. Locke argues that individuals, recognizing the limitations of the state of nature, voluntarily agree to give up some of their individual power to form a government.
Okay, so they trade some freedom for security. They consent to be ruled by laws in exchange for the protection of their rights.
That's the essence of the social contract. It's a mutual agreement between individuals to create a political society where their rights can be more effectively safeguarded.
So government isn't some divine institution imposed from above. It's a human creation designed to serve the needs of the people.
Exactly. And this idea of government by consent was revolutionary for Locke's time. It challenged the traditional view of monarchy as divinely ordained and really paved the way for modern democratic thought.
But what kind of government did Locke envision arising from this social contract? What were its limits and obligations?
That's where things get even more interesting. Locke argued that the primary function of government is to protect those natural rights that individuals possessed in the state of nature, the rights to life, liberty, and property.
So the government's role isn't to grant rights, but to safeguard those that pre-exist government itself.
Precisely. And to do this effectively, Locke believed that government power should be limited and divided.
Limited and divided. What does that mean?
Well, by limited, Locke meant that government shouldn't have absolute or arbitrary power. Its authority should be constrained by the rule of law and the consent of the governed. And by divided, he meant that power shouldn't be concentrated in the hands of a single individual or entity.
So a system of checks and balances, like the separation of powers we have in the United States, with a legislative branch to make laws, an executive branch to enforce them, and a judicial branch to interpret them.
Exactly. Locke didn't explicitly advocate for those specific branches of government, but the principles of limited and divided government that he articulated were so influential in shaping the American system as well as other democratic systems around the world.
It's incredible how these ideas, conceived centuries ago, continue to resonate with us today. It's like Locke laid the intellectual foundation for the modern struggle for individual rights and democratic governance.
He did, but there's one more piece of Locke's political philosophy that's just as relevant today as it was in his time: his theory of the right to revolution.
The right to revolution. That sounds pretty radical. Is Locke saying that it's okay to overthrow the government?
Well, not exactly. Not exactly okay. Locke was very deeply aware of the dangers of political instability and violence, but he also believed that if a government becomes tyrannical, if it systematically violates the natural rights of its citizens, then the people have a right to resist and even overthrow that government.
So it's a last resort, a safety valve, a way to ensure that government remains accountable to the people.
That's a good way to put it. Locke's right to revolution wasn't a license for anarchy or chaos. It was a recognition that ultimate political authority rests with the people and that they have a right to defend their fundamental liberties against oppression.
This is such powerful stuff. It makes you realize how radical and forward-thinking Locke really was. His ideas about natural rights, the social contract, limited government, and the right to revolution have shaped the course of history.
They have. And they continue to inspire debates about the nature of political authority, the limits of government power, and the rights of individuals to resist tyranny. But Locke's influence extends beyond the realm of politics. He also had profound things to say about religious tolerance, which we'll explore in our next deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the brilliant mind of John Locke. We've covered so much ground from his revolutionary ideas about knowledge and language to his profound impact on political philosophy. Things like natural rights and the social contract.
Right, and now we turn to another area where Locke's ideas continue to resonate really deeply: religious tolerance.
It's striking how often Locke's work seems to be a direct response to the turmoil of his times. England in the 17th century was a hotbed of religious and political conflict. Did those experiences directly shape his views on religious freedom?
Oh, absolutely. Imagine a society that is deeply divided along religious lines, with different factions kind of vying for power and control. This was the reality that Locke lived in, and he witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences of religious intolerance. Things like persecution, violence, and just social unrest.
Yeah, it's easy to forget how revolutionary the idea of religious freedom truly was. For centuries, the dominant view in Europe was that the state had the right, even the duty, to enforce religious conformity. Challenging that orthodoxy must have been incredibly bold.
It was, and Locke did so with remarkable clarity and conviction in his letter concerning toleration. In this work, he really lays out a powerful argument for separating religious belief from the authority of the state.
So for Locke, the government should stay out of matters of faith. What were his reasons for this separation?
Well, first and foremost, Locke believed that force is just completely ineffective in matters of belief. You can't coerce someone into genuinely believing something that they don't. Trying to do so only leads to hypocrisy and resentment.
Makes sense. You can force outward conformity, but you can't control what's truly going on in someone's heart and mind.
Exactly. And for Locke, this was not only a practical issue, but a moral one as well. He argued that it's fundamentally wrong for the state to use its power to compel religious belief. True faith, he believed, must be freely chosen, based on individual conviction and reason.
So religious freedom is essential for the integrity of both the individual and the faith itself. Trying to enforce belief through coercion kind of undermines the very essence of what it means to have faith.
Precisely. And this commitment to individual conscience and freedom of belief was really deeply rooted in Locke's broader philosophy. Remember his concept of the mind as a tabula rasa? If our minds are blank slates at birth, then we're free to form our own beliefs based on our experiences and our reasoning.
Yeah, it all comes back to that foundational idea, doesn't it? The blank slate. It suggests that we have a fundamental right to think for ourselves, to choose our own paths, both in the realm of knowledge and in the realm of faith.
Absolutely. And this connection between individual autonomy and religious freedom is so powerful. It's a key reason why Locke's ideas continue to be so influential in debates about religious liberty today.
But it wasn't just about individual freedom for Locke, was it? Didn't he also see religious tolerance as essential for social harmony?
He did. Locke argued that attempts to impose religious uniformity often backfire, leading to division, conflict, and even violence. He believed that a society where different religious groups are free to coexist peacefully is just a far more stable and just society.
It's amazing how Locke's ideas on religious tolerance seem so self-evident to us today, yet they were so radical for his time. They challenged centuries of tradition and really paved the way for a more pluralistic and inclusive understanding of society.
And it's important to note that Locke's arguments for religious tolerance weren't just these abstract philosophical musings. He was deeply engaged in the political and social debates of his time, and his writings had a real impact on shaping public opinion and policy.
It's inspiring to think that philosophical ideas can actually make a difference in the world. It gives me hope that maybe, just maybe, we can continue to build on Locke's legacy of reason, tolerance, and individual liberty.
That's a worthy aspiration. And I think the best way to honor Locke's legacy is to continue to engage with his ideas, to grapple with their complexities, and to apply them to the challenges that we face in our own time.
Well, that's what this deep dive has been all about, exploring the richness and relevance of Locke's thought. From the nature of knowledge to the foundations of government and the importance of religious freedom, Locke's ideas continue to shape our world. And it's been an incredible journey, into the mind of one of history's most influential thinkers. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of John Locke. We'll see you next time for another exploration of knowledge and ideas.